We're back for the balance breakdown. We're going to go straight into it and break down this week's action. The UFC Fight Night, Marvin Vettori versus Jared Cannonier was live in the UFC Apex. We've got plenty to discuss. Myself and Harry, we're going in blind. We don't know what we think about anything going in here. So anything could happen over the course of the next hour or so. Harry, how are things, sir? How are you doing?
I mean, there's a lot to discuss, and I think I am somewhat overwhelmed by the main event. There were some really great performances on this card, some really interesting talking points coming into it, and I'm excited to get into it, sir.
Absolutely, so am I. The card delivered again once more. We had high hopes that it was going to deliver though too. In fairness to us, on the preview show, lots of great bouts, and we'll kick off at the main event. Let's talk Jared Cannonier versus Marvin Vettori. I texted you yesterday to see if you'd watched the fights yet, because I was going to maybe try and guess who your severe spotlight was going to be on, and because I was thinking it could be one of a number of people this weekend, to be honest, inside and outside UFC, if we're being completely honest. But we'll talk about your severe spotlight, who was Arman Tsaurkyan next. But this main event, Harry, oh goodness gracious me, I had one of my friends text me saying that he fancied Jared Cannonier to win this fight within the third round. And I said, that's a bold call, because Marvin Vettori has never been finished in his career. And I think we saw a perfect example of why on Saturday night, to unfortunately his detriment, I feel, because he took a record number of significant strikes for a middleweight fight against a possessed Jared Cannonier. One thing that I am massively impressed in, and we can say this about Jared Cannonier on Saturday night, we can say this about Israel Adesanya, both who were criticized for lack of output and lack of action in their previous fights, both came out and delivered in the fights after that. And I have to give number one, Izzy, and I did already, maximum credit for that. But I want number two, I'm going to give Jared Cannonier even more credit here, Harry, because a man at his age, coming in his late 30s, having been disappointed in his performance in the title fight and having lost that title fight against Israel, he came in there, he's come in with a different mentality after the fact. And yes, we did see him in there with Sean Strickland last fight, where he won a split decision. And, maybe some of the criticisms could still play through, but, he came in here and, he made a point of it after the fight to kind of say that he didn't want to be considered as a guy who was gun shy. And I think that change in mentality coming at this stage of his career, at this age as well, is very admirable in my eyes. I'm very curious to see and hear your thoughts on this main event, Harry.
So I'm very conflicted. On one hand, we must congratulate Jared Cannonier for coming out against a guy who is notoriously strong in his striking defense, notoriously difficult to sort of pull out of the game plan that's been assigned to him, and notoriously difficult to look excellent against, right? You see the criticisms lobbied against opponents of Marvin Vettori ad nauseum in previous fights, Israel Adesanya being one of them. They've had a close fight before and then a slightly less close fight afterwards. But Marvin Vettori is what happens when you reach an elite level in modern MMA of the basics. Good jab, good head movement, good footwork, good defensive mechanics, can wrestle, knows how to take the back, can finish, fine. Whatever. A solid all-rounder in every aspect. Well, we must congratulate Jared Cannonier for going out and just obliterating that. Absolutely obliterating it. But not just obliterating it, noticing adversity and making changes on the fly. That first round wasn't a good round for Jared Cannonier. He was wobbled twice, and it was because he was trying to fight southpaw, right? He noticed switched back to orthodox, and in the last sort of 45 seconds to a minute, had a much more successful end to the round than he had started. But from then, round two, like I'm looking at my screen and I'm questioning why this hasn't been stopped, whether this is close to being stopped. Now, Vettori manages to get his cadence back in sort of the last 30 seconds and managed somehow to withstand the insane amount of battery acid that was thrown at his face. But there is an element of me here that sees moments, sees situations in that second round, and I seriously have to question, was that intelligent defense? I'm not sure it was. And then the more that we progress through the fight, the more that we, especially in the third round, there's a question for me about what do we do as a corner here? And I think this does raise its ugly head again of, if I'm in the corner, I'd like to think that I ask the question of, do we see a way back for our fighter here? Now, there are moments in round 4 where he has success. There are moments in round 4 where Jared Cannonier slightly steps off the pace and Vettori comes back in, and then Cannonier has to put his foot back on the gas and whatever. But to me, this isn't a question of a single contest. And maybe this is why I'm not fit to be an MMA coach. Maybe this is why I'm not fit to be in that arena. But to me, this is not about the winning of a single contest. This is about what happens to Marvin Vettori when he's gone home that night after he's gone to the hospital, got checked out, got his stitches, had some of the swelling taken down, had some painkillers. Well, he's going to go back to a hotel room and he's going to be suffering for the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, for the initial bruising to start to come out, for the initial swelling to start to go down. We don't know how long his eyes are going to be wide, sort of bulged and swelled shut for. We don't know what it's going to be like to walk around. He took a plethora of leg kicks, a plethora of body kicks. What are his ribs looking like? How's his breathing just day to day when he sat there? Is he able to eat properly because his jaw took so much damage? Like, these are the things I think that we don't think about that won't just affect him in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but will affect his potential longevity of his career. And even outside of that, when he's Marvin Vettori, retired UFC fighter. And these are the things I think it must be very difficult in the heat of moment to think about. But these are the things I think we have to think about in fights like this.
Oh, well, I tweeted straight away after the fight that I feel Marvin Vettori needs to take a lot of time off because, you're talking about weeks and months and years. I'm talking about maybe Marvin Vettori never being the same again after a beatdown like that, to be honest, and that's the reality of the situation there. Yeah, we can marvel in his, and I got caught up into it. I marveled in his chin on Saturday night and his toughness, but yeah, it was after the fight I was like, yeah, man, I kind of, when you get caught up into the drama of the fight and maybe you see him getting a second wind or a third wind or having a little bit of success. And I think it was like you suggested, Harry, it was those little pieces of success that he was having at small stages and rounds that was just about keeping them in, or definitely keeping the ref away. I think the mentality around stopping fights and the amount of negativity that surrounds it when it does happen, both from fighters inside mixed martial arts, fans outside of mixed martial arts. It's sad that it's a small kind of environment of people that maybe think the way you're thinking, or thinking about what I kind of tweeted after the fight, and giving Marvin Vettori enough time to kind of recover from what I described as a colossal beatdown on Saturday night. And it is strange. We can marvel in Jared Cannonier's success and performance, but we must also acknowledge, and we spoke about this last week as well, and the joy of seeing Charles Oliveira winning. But, with someone's joy comes someone's hurt and someone's anguish. And, we've seen it in Marvin Vettori, and hopefully he makes a good recovery. Hopefully we get to see him back in there looking himself. But I think not for one way or another, Marvin Vettori definitely left a piece of him inside the octagon on Saturday night.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that it's really hard actually covering MMA. It really is. And it's really hard because you know, and I don't mean to be on my soapbox or anything here, but we as media members have far more access to the humans that are these fighters than your average fan, right? The average fan will see the post-fight press conference, they'll see the pre-fight press conference, they'll see the embedded, they'll see the fight, they might see the in-cage interview, and they then will have access to their social medias, right? But there are moments in interviews, before interviews, after interviews, that you and I get to see these fighters for just humans, right? Like just people going about their day-to-day lives, trying to make ends meet, trying to be as successful as possible. And I think that when you watch the rhetoric online, it is, oh my God, Marvin's chin. Oh my God, his toughness, his heart, his this, his that. But that's not really what we're looking at, right? That's the fantastical fairy tale version of what we are looking at. What we are looking at is a man going in to a sporting, potentially, contest, an athletic contest, and putting his future life, the richness, the fluidity, the effervescence of his future life on the line. And Jared Cannonier, yes, they signed a contract. This isn't me pointing fingers or putting blame or any guilt, but Jared Cannonier has altered the way that Marvin Vettori will live his future life. We don't know to what degree. It's very, very difficult for us to say that. But one of the truly dark sides of covering MMA is that these fighters, and I say this and I have said this and I'll hark back to it and I really will try to do it in the future, but with the Sam Creasy interview after the KO to Shaj Hack, like he was so open about what it was like to be him in those moments. And he's a man that takes a loss very, very well. But I would absolutely love to shine a light on Marvin Vettori and have a conversation and show people exactly what it's like for a fighter at the absolute apex of a division. Because make no mistake about it, if it was the other way around and Marvin Vettori had put the beating on Jared Cannonier, well, it may be Israel Adesanya that had tweeted bro about Marvin Vettori, and Marvin Vettori might be now back in line at another potential title shot, a trilogy, at a whatever. You can start to build the rhetoric of, oh, it was a close fight once, and Marvin thinks he won this and that and the next thing. But instead, Marvin Vettori goes home to his family and goes home to the echoing silence of he has a tough chin. What does that do? Like, that doesn't do anything. It doesn't pay the bills. It just leaves him in pain and more broken than he was the 25 minutes beforehand.
And there's one thing I guess to play devil's advocate is that, you know, you are willingly getting in there and doing it. And I'd be willing to bet as well, because of the mental structure that you build when you are preparing for a fight, that if you were to ask Marvin Vettori, would he have liked the fight to be stopped? He would have told you no. Would he have changed anything? The only thing he would have changed maybe was his fight tactics. And you go back in, and I've been there. I've been in a fight where I've had my jaw broken and it was in bits. And you go through the recovery process and you do talk to these fighters and you do feel sorry for yourself, right? And you do feel, you know, things could be changed, but there's never any doubt that you want to get back in there. You know what I mean? You'll have the doubt, you'll have the kind of wonder what went wrong, but you'll recover, you'll go back into the gym, and you might be tentative for maybe a couple of days, but then you're going to have one good round of sparring, or now you're going to have one good round of jiu-jitsu, or you're going to start feeling sharp again on the pads. And then that belief and that kind of want and hunger to kind of go in there and rectify those mistakes comes back. And all those thoughts go out the back window, and all that doubt goes out the back window. And then you're just trying to look to go in there and prove yourself again. And that's the vicious cycle of being a fighter in combat sports in general, not even just mixed martial arts. And it's something that, yeah, definitely is worth acknowledging. And it's a dark side of mixed martial arts. To shine maybe a brighter light on Jared Cannonier, you mentioned the stance switch, which was pivotal in his success at the end of the first round and going on again. Is there anything else that you pinpointed with Jared Cannonier's performance. I mean, he made a decision at the end of round 1 that it wasn't working, and that's very hard to do, and that's what you got to do at the highest level. But he remained calm and didn't punch himself out in Marvin Vettori's toughness, for lack of a better term. And it was just an excellent performance from Jared Cannonier, and to maybe turn a little bit of a positive spin on it before we finish up and move to the co-main event. It was truly an excellent performance from Jared Cannonier, wasn't it?
It was everything that we've been waiting for, you know? Like against elite level competition, it was everything that we've been waiting for. There was variety, there was damage, there was power, there was beautiful defensive work at times, there was really, really consistent pressure. He was able to use his footwork to push Marvin Vettori on the back foot, which is a difficult thing in itself. He beat up the body, he beat up their head, he switched his combinations and turned them on their head and had Marvin Vettori biting on absolutely everything. I really liked the leaping left hook. He went right straight to the body, leaping left hook, and then the other way around. The leg kicks were absolutely gorgeous. I thought masking the leg kicks to go to the body was great. He mixed in some high kicks really nicely. The elbows from clinch situations, Marvin didn't know whether there was a knee or a body shot or an elbow coming, so Jared just hit him with all of them. Like, it was just an absolutely beautiful display of a full arsenal, a full repertoire of MMA just striking full stop. And that's kind of what we've expected and wanted to see from Jared Cannonier. And I would love to know what has happened in the last sort of 6 to 8 months that have forced him or allowed him to grow into this space that he's carved out for himself. Because in the post-fight press conference, he was talking about, I've really tried to change my style over the last little while. I've really tried to come into my own. I've really tried to become this fighter that I've wanted to be. And you can obviously tell he took a big risk by coming out southpaw. And I thought it was very admirable for himself, because I listened to comms and I could hear that it wasn't his corner that was necessarily calling for it, but it was himself that said, you know what? This hasn't been a good start to this round. I'm going to switch this up, go back to what I know, go back to what I'm used to. The test failed. And we saw immediately how good the test was turned on its head in the second round. And, you know, we can argue whether that should have been stopped or not. But the duality of that first round to the performance in the second round was absolutely ad nauseum. And as soon as the momentum built, and I just want to lay on the Marvin Vettori toughness for a second, like Vettori was still there in all of those rounds, 3, 4, and 5, but just because the damage had been done so aggressively in that second round, Jared had so much time and space where he could relax off the beat a little bit and take a little bit of a breather and then go back in for some more and go back in for some more and go back in for some more. If you're looking as Jared Cannonier to make people forget the first Israel Adesanya fight and hype people up for a second one, this is exactly the way that you do it.
Very, very well said. And you know what? He threw in a couple of takedowns as well to kind of even mix things up even further. Just I'm mad impressed. I am. I'm like, you know, to do it at this stage of your career, I just fucking love seeing that shit, man. And, you know, Jared Cannonier, he deserves a big fight next, whether that's a number 1 contender, whether it's straight in with Izzy again. I mean, you come out and you perform like that, Harry. I'm not going to argue him taking on Izzy later on this year. What are you kind of seeing? I don't think we even discussed Marvin Vettori. Take a year off after that. If that's what I want next for Marvin Vettori. For Jared Cannonier, I'm looking forward to seeing him again. Is it Izzy for you? Is it somebody else? There's not too many avenues that he can kind of go down, but I mean, no one is going to be arguing, especially from my end, if he was thrown in there and given another chance against Israel.
No, and you know, Israel on some recent podcasts has talked about wanting to fight Rob for a third time if Rob goes out and wins against Dricus. He's talked about wanting to fight Dricus du Plessis because obviously it's a new matchup. There's some interesting back and forth, if you can call it interesting there. And so I kind of feel like if you're Jared Cannonier, you've done enough now, right? I don't think you need to fight a Rob Whittaker if he wins. I don't think you need to fight a Dricus du Plessis necessarily. One thing that the UFC now kind of have seemingly fallen upon is if Dricus goes out and beats Robert Whittaker, well, you have this fresh, new, interesting matchup. But let's say it's a bit of a back and forth war and Dricus comes through it. Well, Jared Cannonier is right there and available, right? Didn't take an insane amount of damage. Definitely took some damage, but didn't take an insane amount of damage. He's going to need an 8 months, 9 months, 12 months layoff. He could probably turn around in 6 months. And so then if you're, maybe less, if you're then looking at a Dricus needing a little bit of time off or vice versa, you can just line them up for Izzy now, right? And that, I think, is something that UFC will appreciate. They want to get their champions out. They want to get their champions, especially the marquee champions, out fighting as much as possible. And so we've kind of got two number one contenders, whether that's, just straight in line, whether that's Cannonier right now, no problem. Whether that's Dricus du Plessis after the Rob Whittaker fight, whether that's Rob Whittaker himself. I think it's a really nice layup for the UFC in these two fights.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we shall move on to the co-main event and another great performance as well. Like I said, Arman Tsaurkyan was your severe spotlight this week, and I'm going to hand it straight over to you, Harry, to explain why.
Simply because when we're looking at fighters, especially fighters with the ceiling of somebody like Arman Tsaurkyan, we're looking for tests. Now, he's possibly been tested a little bit too much this early in his career. Debut against Islam Makhachev is an insane test looking back at it. And I think we kind of knew that at the start, but still, he went toe to toe with him, 3 rounds, lose the decision. Fine, no problem. I think the Matoya Skamrot test was maybe a touch too soon also, but he's now taking on a late notice replacement. And, I tried to discuss that in my spotlight of what that sort of does to a fighter, right? You're in a camp for 8, 12, 16 weeks, depending on how long you've got. You've focused on one man, one date, one set of skills, one game plan for that amount of time. You've invested money, time, nutrition, all of this stuff into this specific time and date, and it's then pulled under the rug from you. And then you're kind of lost in this chaos of, well, what do I do now? I don't really necessarily want to fight down to Joaquim Silva because that's a big risk to me. And we almost found out why. But then in the same vein, it's very rare that somebody above him is going to fight down on short notice. And so he does the thing and he invests in himself and he backs himself and he bets on himself and he takes on Joaquim Silva. Well, Joaquim Silva's kind of in the same position. He's got to worry about, oh, shit, I need to make weight really quickly, or I need to do this, or what am I going to game plan for? What am I going to do? I'm the underdog here. I can go in with slightly less pressure, but I still want to win this fight, right? This is an absolutely insanely huge opportunity for me. And one of the things I like to see is the adversity test. And what's insane to me is that we didn't really see the adversity test in the Islam Makhachev fight. We didn't really see the adversity test in the Matoya Skamrot fight because Arman Tsaurkyan rose and fought at that level. Okay, he lost both fights. The Matoya Skamrot fight certainly closer than the Islam Makhachev fight, but he was in both of those in a competitive way. Here, though, he styles on Joaquim Silva for that first round, looks fantastic, and then gets complacent, then gets a little naive, gets a little bit nonchalant. And what we saw Joaquim Silva do is he's like, I know I'm not getting next to this guy or near this guy if I try to technique with him in boxing range. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to stand in the pocket, I'm going to take this guy's shots, and I'm going to wait for my moment because my moment will come because I can see that he's taking for granted the head of steam that he's built up here. And the head of steam was absolutely exhausted by a left hook to the top of the dome. And Arman Tsaurkyan's on wobbly legs for a minute, and Joaquim Silva cannot believe his fortune. And he dives on him, and Arman Tsaurkyan does a good job of turning the corner, getting to a double, and ending the round on top. And then the third round is the most interesting to me. It's what happens after the adversity. You faced the adversity, you survived it. Fine. Fighters do this all the time. But it's what happens afterwards. And you could tell in between, in that minute and change, that between the bell goes and they're starting again, Arman Tsaurkyan's had a conversation with himself. And he said, okay, now there's a potential for you to embarrass me here. There's a potential for this fight to come away from me. I was treating this like a hard spar. I was treating this like I'm going to try and guide you through this fight. For these 3 rounds, I'm going to take my win and I'm going to walk off. But in round 3, he comes out and he says, I'm going to hurt you now. And that tells me a lot about who Arman Tsaurkyan is and what his place in this division is going to be.
What would you say to someone who said that he should have tried to do that from the starting bell?
I think that there's an argument for that. But in the same vein, if I'm Arman Tsaurkyan and I feel like I am going to be so many more levels higher than this fighter, the main thing is you go in and you hit and you don't get hit. By going out in that third round and throwing hell for leather, yes, he was dominant and yes, he got the finish, but there's also an opportunity for him to get clipped again. And the risk of him getting clipped is far higher by him putting his foot on the gas tank and taking risks to finish the fight than it was in the first round, where he took a couple of jabs, a couple of low kicks, and a right hand. If he wants to go in, take an easy 30-27, which I think was his plan, right? Take him down, grind him there. The ground control was immense when he got him there. Just grind him out for those 3 rounds, jump on the mic and be like, look, short notice, fine, no problem. Give me X guy, right? Give me this. Give me a Beneil Dariush. Give me this. Give me that. Give me the winner of Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. I want this, right? If that's what he planned to do, I have absolutely no problem in him doing that. He is in there to win the fight in the most efficient way possible. If the most efficient way possible is the third round for him, fine. And I think there's an argument for that. But I will never have a problem with a fighter going in and having a work-like man performance where they go in, pick up a check, and get out healthy.
But unfortunately, the UFC don't like that. And I think that he was probably trying to go in there and get the finish, and he kind of mentioned it after. And I asked that question, the last one, just to play devil's advocate. But I agree with everything that you said on your initial assessment of Tsaurkyan. And look, it was a blessing in disguise for him getting hurt, because it made him kick up that extra gear in round 3 and prove the difference in the skill levels as well. And where it is so difficult for a guy like Tsaurkyan to kind of go in there and fight down, sometimes you can kind of get caught into fighting to the level of your opponent, which I think he might have been guilty of in the second round a little bit, where he knew he had the kind of comfort of utilizing his grappling. Maybe he started chasing for a fancy knockout. But my opinion is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So he did that in round 3, got the fight down and was really excellent, really. And, by getting the finish, it did put him in more of a pole position to call out the likes of Dariush, to call out Michael Chandler, to call out all the big bucks in the lightweight division. And I think on top of everything else, we have to remember that this man is only 26 years of age, but there is some things he still needs to work on. And, we talked about with Ian Gary, if he was in there with higher level competition, would he have gotten away with that mistake in the second round? It would have been a less of a percentage of a chance. If Dustin Poirier hurts you like that, I don't think you're going to escape it. If Justin Gaethje hurts you, you might not. Michael Chandler, Beneil, all those big boys. So, that's why you fight and you take those chances if you're Arman Tsaurkyan, because you learn, it's a lot more affordable to make mistakes with a lesser opponent, with all due respect, in Joaquim Silva, than it is to go in there and make that mistake against higher level competition. When you look at things that you would like to see improve in Tsaurkyan's game, obviously the striking, number one, you want to be defensively more sounder. He was getting hit with that left hook quite a bit, so he's going to have to, I think Shawnee described the old tennis ball to the chin technique, and he's not too far wrong in that assessment either. Was there anything like, obviously the striking we can talk about, was there anything else that maybe stood out to you as well?
I think for me, the majority of it is mental, actually. I think the fighting to your opponent's level thing is actually one of his greatest strengths, as well as one of his greatest weaknesses, because you go in and you look at, on your UFC debut, you go and run relatively toe-to-toe with Islam Makhachev. And I think even then we knew how good he was. You go in and you run a razor-close decision with Mateusz Gamrot. You go in and you absolutely run over Joel Alvarez. It seems to me as though when there's a fighter in front of him that he is aware of the level, he goes from round 3 pace immediately. And that's when he's the most exciting. That's when he's on his P's and Q's the entire time. But it's when he fights slightly lower, and I think this is an interesting thing for us to see going forward, is I think he did fight at the level of Joaquim Silva, and that cost him until he had to change that and go up. And so I think, yes, there's fundamental boxing things that need to change. There's fundamental footwork and head movement things that need to change and be improved on. as with every fighter, right? But I'm really interested in the mental side of this. I'm really interested to see who comes next and what happens there. Like, personally, I'll throw the name out. I think either a Hanato Moicano rematch, just reschedule that and let's get it going. I think still that's a really compelling matchup for me. Or I wouldn't mind seeing Rafael Fiziev. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. I like that fight. I think it's an interesting wheelhouse position for Arman. Can he get the fight down? That's a really dangerous striker. So we'll see whether you fix some of those holes that we saw against Joaquim Silva. And so either of those two, it's not a drastic step up to the immediate elite of the elite, but it's a chance for him to get the ball rolling again with somebody in a similar ballpark to himself.
I won't disagree too much. Obviously, I mentioned Beneil Dariush on the preview show, and I'd still like him to go up there because, you know, that is an elite level opposition. A guy coming off a loss too, who's going to be coming into his next fight with a lot more meaning per se. And I mean, that's a bit rich to say. I mean, every fight has a little bit of meaning, but you know, you want to respond after losing, and it would have been Beneil's first loss in 8 or 9 fights, but at this stage of his career, it's like, yeah, you don't want to push him too much, but if you push him a little bit and he fails, it's not the end of the world. We can get him back there as well. Do we get him into a position where he fights Beneil and then, you know, we can maybe fight the likes of Fiziev or someone in around that area as well, where you don't have to push him up into the upper elite status of the division. But I mean, after that Makhachev fight, I didn't dust off the tweet this weekend, but I have in previous fights. I tweeted that Arman Tsaurkyan is going to be a future champion of the lightweight division. I still feel very confident about that. Although, if he was to fight Islam tomorrow, I'm not quite sure he would get the win. But you know, there's lots of time there. There's lots of challenges, and there's lots of lessons to be learned. And I'm very excited to see the journey and what's next for him. We were talking about fighting to levels, Harry, and we have to say that Christian Leroy Duncan did not do that on Saturday night against Arman Tsaurkyan. Very surprising, disappointing performance for a guy, you know, who didn't have things go his own way against Dusko Todorovic in his first fight. So, you know, you want to make sure that you're coming in and getting the fundamentals right, especially against a guy like Arman Tsaurkyan, who was a very difficult test on paper and proved to be a very difficult test as well when the fight happened. But you're not giving yourself any chance when you're fucking turning your back and you're spinning and you're trying to throw all these extravagant strikes, which ultimately lead to you kind of draining your gas tank a little bit. I kind of said to Shawnee, I felt he was exposed a little bit from maybe a lack of experience and know-how. With Christian Leroy Duncan, you need to realize that yourself. But you know what? It's important to have someone behind you, and that's your coaching team as well, to recognize that as well. And I think that was a letdown for him as well on Saturday night. What's your assessment on his performance and the fight as a total, Harry?
So I think that there's a couple of points here. I think first off, the base notions of his game are all there. They're all there. There are absolutely some things to work on. We need to see some more fundamental striking setups, right? We're not in, and this is with all respect to, but we're not in Cage Warriors anymore, where opponents are being picked for you in order to quite literally get you to the UFC. Now we know Ian Dean matches fighters very fairly and matches them with the right tests at the right time to get you to the UFC. But the middleweight division in the regionals, even that is a big step down from what you're expecting to see. Maybe not a Dusko Todorovic level, but certainly an Arman Tsaurkyan or a RoboCop or somebody around these sorts of levels of Bruno Silva. These sorts of guys are far superior to the guys on the regional scene. And so we must have all of our ducks in order. Christian Leroy Duncan's footwork, his defensive footwork, and the timing and the creativity and the arsenal of strikes is immense. It's phenomenal. I couldn't agree more with Dom Cruz on comms, who says, if you just add some jabs, some hooks, some straights, we've got a serious fighter on our hands. Now, I think what I'd add to that is we need far more of a get-up game. There were moments in that fight when Arman takes the fight down and Christian Leroy Duncan just locks up a close guard and, you know, goes for a Hail Mary armbar that's nowhere near and whatever. It seems like a lot of Christian Leroy Duncan's training has been staying on the feet. And what I mean by that is his work from defensively on the cage was fine. He was turning the corner fine. He was pummeling his underhooks fine. And all of that stuff was generally okay. It's the stuff when it hits the mat. And it feels like there hasn't been as much time on the floor finding feet to hips and scrambling as there has been on everything else. But if I'm coming in here, I think my biggest criticism is it's just naivety. It's naivety to think that that level of experience, that level of explosivity, that level of creativity is solely going to get you to where you want to be. But I actually think that this will be probably, like with many, many times we've seen with fighters, it'll probably be the best thing that's happened to Christian Leroy Duncan, because he's gone out and he's looked absolutely fantastic in parts of that fight. But he will see, if I add 10, 15, 25% to my striking arsenal, I go out and I destroy that dude.
How much do you think it would benefit for him? Like in his style, I think he's got a perfect style to kind of maybe visit a place like Great Britain top team to utilize that. Do you think maybe like spreading himself out across a couple of gyms may benefit Christian going forward? Like, I think, he's not too far away from Team Renegade either, which would be also excellent for him to do. Obviously, he's with range martial arts now. But it's a firm assessment, but I do feel, in your naivety as a young fighter, you need that guidance from your coach and your team to kind of steer you in the right direction as well. And it doesn't seem that he's getting steered in the right direction based off that performance or even the messages that were coming in between rounds as well. What would your assessment on that whole situation be?
So I think if I was to offer him a gym, it would either be Renegade or London Shoot Fighters, because
Shoot Fighters. Yeah, I said top team. I did mean Shoot Fighters. Apologies.
like, it's quite obvious that there are elements of Michael Venom Page in his game.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But if you watch Michael Venom Page, he throws 100% more jabs than Christian Leroy Duncan, right? Because that's how he's setting up his timing and his footwork and his awkward angles. I think the one saving grace I will give is you could hear Mark Weir screaming during rounds that he wanted much more hands. He wanted jabs, he wanted hooks, he wanted straights. He wanted much, much, much more. He kept saying, put your hands together. More hands, put your hands together. I need more combinations. And Leroy Duncan just didn't do it. And I think, to your point, it's very difficult to know what goes on behind closed doors, right? And what Christian Leroy Duncan looks like behind closed doors. Is there just a ton of hands and it was just an off night? I don't know if we have any evidence to suggest that it was or it wasn't. But I also think, to your point, and I think this is something that fighters should do more often than not, and I've talked about it on Speaker's Corner with Shawnee before, is I think more fighters, especially in the UK, should cross-train. It's a tiny enough island with a limited amount enough of elite level fighters. These fighters should be together. These fighters should be getting better together, especially when they're dotted around the UFC. And these fighters, okay, yeah, sure, they might fight each other in the long-term future, but there's not that many UK and Irish fighters in the UFC that they should not be together and getting better together.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. Just to maybe barely touch on Arman Tsaurkyan, let's not kind of put him in the rear view mirror. It was a good performance. Yeah, he had to deal with a certain level of adversity in the first round, but you know what? It was a guy out there having maybe a little bit too much fun against a guy who just relied on his fundamentals, and that's what Tsaurkyan did throughout the fight. Called out a shot for the top 15 next. I mean, I wouldn't argue against it. I mean, it's early days. Let's give him a crack. I think look at Christian Leroy Duncan is a good fighter and he will be back. He will come back. He will perform and we'll see much better performances than we did. But, Tsaurkyan was good as well. And he's kind of coming up and creating his own kind of pathway through the middleweight division as well. And what would you like to see? Maybe a couple of thoughts on his performance and maybe what you'd like to see next.
So he proved that fundamentals win fights, like if we were to really put our hand on heart and say, skill for skill, who's the better striker? I think we might lean towards Christian Leroy Duncan, right? But when we're saying who's the better fighter, who puts it together better, well, the obvious answer is Arman Tsaurkyan. We saw takedowns, we saw fundamental boxing, we saw some head movement. Okay, he got caught with some wacky stuff. He got caught with some spinning elbows. He got caught with some high kicks. He got caught with a couple of low kicks. But he kept chipping away at everything he needed to. He checked kicks, he blocked punches, he moved his head, and he landed jabs, straights, hooks, and kicks. I don't think you can ask for much more than that. And I also agree, like, he's 32, right? So let's move him relatively quickly. It's a middleweight, isn't it? They're going to 36, 37, 38. And obviously, if you're Jared Cannonier, you're going to nearly 40. But I would like to see him move on. I wouldn't mind Fluffy Hernandez as a name.
Ooh, like that. I like that.
It's not quite top 15, but I wouldn't mind Fluffy Hernandez.
It'd be like the top 15 qualifier, that one.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%. It's a good shout. Tough fucking fight too for Tsaurkyan as well. I like that. We should move on. Did we see one of the knockouts of the year when Manuel Torres absolutely upended Nicolas Motta with a elbow in the first round? I mean, we added it into the awards. I was amazed that he was able to get off the elbow that clean, given how far away he was in distance. He covered some ground to get off that elbow, Harry, didn't he?
It was unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
Insane.
Like, it's one of those where a lot of the time when you're watching fights, you kind of, in your head, there's a rhetoric of, oh, I think he's trying to set up X, or it looks like he's trying to set up Y. I didn't call an elbow from out there.
Not a chance. Not either did I. That's why I was amazed by it. And that's why we were talking about it as a knockout of the year, because you don't land elbows like that from the outside. Those are normally separation from the clinch or right up in close in the pocket as well. Like, it was insane elbow.
It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about as there was literally a minute of fighting, but get him in there ASAP. Let me see that kid again really, really quickly.
100%. Look, we're going to give ourselves a virtual high five here, because I think we called this game plan for Nicolas Dalby down to a T on the preview show, because we said that what you need to do was go in there and set a heavy pace and don't let Salikov come in and fight his lunge, like kind of lugging forward, slow paced, explosive kind of fight. And Nicolas Dalby didn't do that. He came in and fought hard. He had a difficult start to the fight, that being said, but found his range. The head kick towards the end of round 2 was amazing, kind of kicked them off into the kind of performance that we've seen in rounds 2 and rounds 3. And it was a really wonderful performance, wasn't it?
This is a quintessential Nicolas Dalby performance, right? It's grit, it's toughness, it's determination, it's pressure, and it's fundamentals. He keeps that nice wide stance. He gets hit a little bit, but he does a lot of hitting. And exactly as we said on the preview show, pace and volume will beat Muslim Salikov. Because if you are constantly, and this is kind of my argument to Christian Leroy Duncan also, Arman Tsaurkyan was doing well at getting off his strikes. If you just stick a jab in his face, it's going to be really difficult for him to sit down on those punches. And we'll get to Modestas Bukauskas a little bit later, where that's exactly the same story. Well, Nicolas Dalby, that's his exact bread and butter. He is going to make sure he is on you and pressuring you and swinging the momentum in his favor for every single second of the 15 to 25 minutes that he's competing. And you are going to have to literally take it away from him if you want to turn the tide. And that's what we saw here. I couldn't be happier for Dalby, really. His whole story, his second stint in the UFC, to be putting together wins like this, I like it. I like it a lot. It's a great, really feel-good story.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree anymore. Brilliant performance, good win, and I'm excited to see his next one as well. In my excitement to talk about Manuel Torres' elbow, I do what I do best, and I skipped over a fight, and that was my guy Pat Sabatini, who, the only way I could describe this performance is he went into the octagon, Harry, and he said, "Not today. Not today." He came in like a demon, got the fight down to where he needed to get it, because that was all the talk before the fight. Was he going to play around on the feet and increase his chances of getting clipped? Pat Sabatini said, I'm going to take you down, I'm going to dominate you, and I'm going to get you out of there. And that's exactly what he did. And I think we saw the true fighter that Pat Sabatini is. We've seen glimpses of it before, but when he's on and when he is in that mindset, Harry, he's going to be a very tough guy to beat at 145 pounds.
This is exactly my thoughts. Exactly my thoughts. Like, I was so close to writing about Pat Sabatini for the Severe Spotlight.
I would have guessed him as number one. I that's why I said I didn't want to ruin it for you and give any names without you watching the fights. It would have been Pat Sabatini. I thought maybe I agree with your Tsaurkyan after the fight, but I thought because it was like a level down in opponents, but like passing the tests he did, it was a fair assessment. But Pat Sabatini, unlucky, shall we say, not to have the spotlight shone on him this week. But now is your chance.
It was just an immaculate performance, a really, really immaculate performance. If this to me, Christian Leroy Duncan, take note, right? Because this is how you win a fight efficiently. He just ran over, said absolutely fucking no messing, took Almeida down and just brutalized him. Absolutely brutalized him. And I don't even mean necessarily with strikes, but this was a mental destruction because he laid in a half guard and he did every single thing that you would want from a grappling perspective perfectly and on the right notes. So if Almeida was happy to concede to his back, he started to pass guard. He started to win upper body frames. He started to win inside frames. He started to land shots. Almeida's like, oh, I don't want to get hit. I'm going to turn my back slightly. Cool. Pat Sabatini starts shin pinning. He starts shin stapling, gets underhooks, lands shots, starts to threaten the back, starts to threaten the mount. Almeida's like, oh, I don't want to be here, goes back to his mount. He's put in the dishwasher again. Then Almeida's like, okay, well, what I'll do instead is I'll start to sit up into Sabatini, maybe try and get my own underhook, maybe try and get myself back to the fence, and I'll try and get up that way. Sabatini says, that's grand, no problem. I'm going to threaten the mount. I'm going to smash your face in. I'm going to strip the post away from you. I'm going to put you in a Dagestani handcuff. I'm just going to absolutely demoralizingly beat you up. And if there is a way, if there is a round to show how you prioritize and use grappling as a method to win a round and find damage, it's this one. It's absolutely this one, because Sabatini was not only pushing the pace positionally, he wasn't only pushing the pace from a literal output perspective, but he was landing shots too. And he was really making Almeida work and sweat, carry his weight. It was just an absolutely phenomenal first round. And then the second round, I mean, he just ran him over, just absolutely ran him over. Those hammer fists from the top to open up the nose of Almeida. It was at that point, Almeida's like, I don't want to be here anymore. And he essentially just gave the head and arm. And that finish was so fast. Just a really, really beautiful performance from Pat Sabatini.
Couldn't agree more. Alexander Costa went in there in the 125-pound division and put a pretty good beat down on Jimmy Flick. We were kind of worried about this per se on the preview show, Harry, and we were worried that if Jimmy Flick couldn't get the fight down, he was going to be in trouble, and that's exactly how this fight played out. And it's just a shame for Jimmy Flick, but Alexander Costa, after coming in on his debut and fighting a guy like Amir Albazi, showcased some great abilities there in that fight, but went out there and put on a really good show. This was like, we kind of suggested this was like the thank you fight for coming in at short notice against Albazi, and he put on a performance that you would have expected. He comes in there, he throws hard, he throws with bad intentions, he's very athletic, he's powerful, and he's going to be a major player in this 125-pound division, isn't he?
This was the note I have at the very, very top of my notes for this fight. If we've got an interesting one here with Costa. You don't run level with Amir Albazi. Okay, gets caught, whatever happens, no problem. You don't run level and look good in spots and frustrate Albazi in the way that Costa did if you're not a good fighter. And look, it's unfortunate for Jimmy Flick. He got absolutely destroyed in this. Absolutely destroyed. Costa just chewed up his leg, chewed up his body, chewed up his head. Jimmy Flick, bless him, tried to switch stances, got the other leg chewed up, tried to desperation shoot, didn't get anything, just got sprawled out, just got mauled, absolutely mauled. It was a destruction from Alessandro Costa, and I am excited for this one. I was excited that, if you're going to lose a fight, he looked good losing a fight against Amir Albazi, comes in here, decimates Jimmy Flick. Give me some of this guy. Absolutely no problem. Absolutely no problem.
Kind of, you could liken it to the performance that Tsaurkyan had against Islam and when he came in and made his UFC debut. We're talking about Amir Albazi, who's number 3 in the 125-pound division right now. So I have to say about Jimmy Fick, not to put a dampener on it, I don't think he's UFC caliber the way he's going out there, too one-dimensional. Looks defeated before the fight even has kind of materialized, like within the first minute of this fight. And it was a horrible matchup for him, let's be real. But didn't do himself any justice, and one has to wonder how much chances Jimmy Flick will have left inside the UFC. I think he's going to be under pressure to keep his job and stay inside the octagon. But we'll see what's next for Alexander Costa. But do you have a name maybe before we move on? Was there anybody maybe that might stick out to you in the 125-pound division that you'd like to see for Costa?
There's a ton of names.
I know.
Let's go through some names that I like. We could do. I wouldn't mind Matt Schnell.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind. Just hear me out, okay? What about Steven Erceg?
Oh, that's a fantastic shout. It's a fantastic shout. I think the only argument I would, off the top of my head, have with that is that, do you reward Erceg for coming in there and taking on a high-level guy in the top 10 by giving him a non-ranked opponent? I think it'd be maybe a little bit unfair. So maybe you could go with Erceg and Schnell, the fight that Dvorak was supposed to have, and maybe you could go Dvorak and Alexander Costa as well. I don't know. Poor Dvorak having to fight two unranked killers. Probably he won't agree with me when I'm suggesting that, but we're not short of. That's a fantastic matchup though, that Erceg one. Jesus, yeah, like that one. On to the next one, as we say, in the 135-pound division. Christian Cannonier went out there and was finished by Kyung Ho Kang. Fucking really good performance by Kang here as well. I was impressed just at the... What's the word I'm looking for? He didn't waste anything. He went out there, knew what he needed to do, and just got it done. He wasn't getting paid by the hour, and he kind of showed that with his performance, didn't he?
I actually disagree here. I am impressed with Kyoyon Kang's ability to take damage and then find his way through the fire. But Christian Cannonier literally only has himself to blame here. He walked out, landed two gorgeous right hands, rocks Kyoyon Kang, and then just runs in with his elbows above his ears. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, very
true.
What
are we doing? Like, don't get me wrong. I understand. You've gone in, you've hurt your man, you want to finish. But this is the difference between elite level fighters and elite level finishers and just regular fighters trying to finish fights. If you you named a couple of them. If you put Dustin Poirier in that position, does he finish the fight? Yeah, he does. If you put Charles Oliveira in that position, does he finish the fight? Without a shadow of a doubt. If you name any of these solid finishers, if you put them in the position where you've had Kyoyon Kang hurt as he was, he doesn't recover. He just doesn't. And yet Cannonier walks in with his elbows pointing to Jesus and his chin wide out, and Kang just throws two hooks and absolutely mops the floor with him. Rolls, finds a rear naked choke with no hooks. Cannonier does a good job to turn inside, but then it's just done. He's too damaged, right? And the shots keep coming, and he finds his way to mount, and then he finds his way to give his back, and in the transition, Kyoyon Kang wraps up a rear naked choke.
Kang kind of showed Cannonier's what he should do when he has a fighter hurt, because I think, that's the opposite of what Cannonier did. And Kang was like, okay, you let me away with it, I'm not going to let you away with it. And it was just an excellent sequence that finished the fight. Rear naked choke in round one. Fight was over within 2 minutes and 25 seconds. Really, that was an exciting fight when it lasted. Always exciting when you see guys getting rocked and coming back. And we'll see what's next. Bantamweight fights, man. Bantamweight fights right now, they're just delivering all round. No matter where these guys are fighting at, whether it's the bottom of the pack or mid pack, whether it's top 15, top 10, all these fighters are so well matched at different levels of this division. It's absolutely insane. All those fights are delivering. Someone else who also delivered, Harry, go ahead.
Javid Basharat next, please. Thank you.
Oh, love it. Love it. Love it. I was always saying someone else who did deliver was Carlos Hernandez, would put in a really, really good performance. You don't like it? You don't like it? Or you do like it? You do like, you were shaking your head there. I was wondering there. I was like, what? I was going to say, what are we doing here? Look at a fight that was marred by a little bit of no, I wouldn't like to say controversy towards the end, but an unusual finish at the end. But let's talk about the performance first, and we'll focus on the performance first. Truly excellent performance against a tricky guy in Denise Bodner as well. Just speak to me, Harry, about what impressed you the most about Carlos Hernandez's win. It was his couple of fights now into his UFC career. Came in through the Contender Series in 2021, picked up a split decision win in that to get a contract, picked up another split decision on his UFC debut against Victor Altamirano, lost against Nascimento by rear naked choke, and comes back with Denise Bodner and wins a technical decision. Really, really good performance. First of all, what impressed you the most, young sir?
There's so much to this fight. Like the first round, these lads just absolutely beat the shit out of each other. Dennis Bodner was there to be hit, did loads of hitting. Hernandez's rolling shoulders, his hooks, his variety, the leg kicks, just all of it was just gorgeous. His ability to get back up from takedowns was great. His ability to take Bodner down was great. That first round was just fantastic. The second round, obviously, the very, very death of it, we have the illegal knee. A really sorry end to what was a pretty decent round all in all. But, again, we see somebody take adversity. It seemed as though Hernandez was pretty fine immediately after the knee. Like he did look a bit pissed off, right?
You have to give him credit for not, and they mentioned it in the boot as well. Some guys, they like to, to kind of put it on a little bit. And in fairness to Hernandez and his character, chose not to do that. The knee itself should have been punished, though. It should have been punished.
1,000,000%. That's a point taken. 1,000,000%. Like that is a flagrant abuse of the rules. Flagrant. Yeah. It is so empirically obvious, that Hernandez is a grounded opponent. Completely grounded. And Bodner looks for the knee, raises his knee, throws the knee. There is absolutely no excuse for that. I understand that we can look at fouls that are grading, right? If you get taken down and your hand reaches the fence and your fingers intuitively grab at it, I understand that that can be a minor infraction and we can deal with that accordingly, right? That's fine. I also understand that if two guys are heading into a clinch and they clash heads on it, inadvertently, a clash of heads, obviously a headbutt, whatever, is a foul, fine. An eye poke, again, we can talk about these in their level of infraction. But Bonda sees Hernandez on the floor in front of him, kneeling with one fist down. And he times the knee and he throws it. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew it. He was in full control of his weapons. We weren't in a transitionary period. We weren't escaping a position. This was quite literally space between the fighters, and he threw an illegal shot. How that doesn't have a point taken, I do not know.
Crazy. Yep, I agree 100%. And, Jarin Villel, he's given that before in other fights, and I'm surprised why he didn't here. Look, we'll talk about a couple of other incidents that happened that may have contributed to some decisions that were made. Obviously when you have a couple of mistakes, it adds extra pressure as fights are going on. Well, I mean, that's a completely obvious one to me, and I think that he let himself down as a ref there by not taking a point at the end of the round. Not going to argue so much about the finish of the fight, but talk me through that trip takedown.
Oh, stop. It was gorgeous. So
that's it. Now, can I say my piece here? I understand the ruling here, right? But you're punishing it. For me, as a pure fight purist, I understand, and I think it was handled in the correct manner, but I don't have to agree with it. I think that as a pure fighting purist, that was a fantastic takedown, and there was no real intent to kind of get in there. Not and it was deemed an accidental headbutt, but I thought it was a crying shame that the man didn't get the finish, because we've seen slam takedowns, and I mean it's part and parcel of it. I'm not going to go out on a limb or die on the hill of him not being rewarded the finish, but it broke my heart as a fight purist for that finish to being taken away, because the technique of it, his head position in that, like, you have to have your head there. You have to have that chin pressure to control the posture in order to get that fighter down. And however way you land, I mean, it was unfortunate that there was contact there. And just broke my heart that he didn't get to finish, because, as you said, the takedown and the finish was absolutely sublime, wasn't it?
It really was. And I mean, you broke down the takedown really, really well, right? The head position is absolutely everything. And it's not Hernandez's intention to separate his head from Bonder's. If he could have stuck his head to his chin the entire way down, landed inside control, postured up and landed some elbows, he would have done. And so, yeah, that was a really strange fight and a strange ending to a fight. When I watched it live, I genuinely didn't see a problem. I genuinely did not see a problem.
Either did I.
All I saw was that there was a takedown and he postured, some elbows landed, and then Bonder was out. Now, obviously, what happened, and I understand the ruling and whatever, it's fine. I'm not going to, as you say, I'm not going to die on a hill about it. At least Hernandez won, and that's the rightful thing. But it's that's a tough margin to make a call in. And I like that referee.
Can I ask you one question? And we'll talk about Ronnie Lawrence and Daniel Argueta in just a moment. But do you feel that decision would have been made if the mistake hadn't been made and the spotlight had been on the officiating team?
I don't know. I think that's a tough thing to say, right? Like, I struggle, because I know that these referees, and I can't remember that referee's name. What's the referee's name?
Who finished, or his name is Jaron Villel.
Right, Jaron Villel. Yeah, exactly. Generally, he's been a pretty consistently high standard of ref, and so I would like to err on the side of caution and say, look, at the end of the day, mistakes happen. As always, when something weird happens, there's always going to be a bit more pressure on you, and there's always going to be a bit more spotlight and whatever.
Plus, he kind of messed up with the knee as well, which might have added a little bit more pressure on him in that instance, you know. I just thought it was unlucky. Like, I mean, I'm not going to go up in arms about it. And I just love seeing that takedown. And for that takedown to be deemed not a finish, I'm like, that sucks. I just thought that sucks for Hernandez after a great performance as well. But nonetheless, and I guess we could throw this into the hat. What happens if Danae Bodner was having a great fight and then it was that sequence that finished it and they went to the cards and Bodner ended up winning? I mean, that would have raised a hell of a lot more. Maybe it would have been called a no con. I don't know what would have happened in that case. They would have went to the scorecards, would they? If it's an accidental headbutt, and he could have got the win there. So I mean, justice prevailed in the end, I think, in this fight, and the right person got the win. And I think we should just move on. It was a great performance. That's what we'll focus on. We'll focus on Carlos Hernandez and his fantastic performance. Teresa Bleda was someone you were looking forward to seeing. She had a little bit of difficulty in her fight, but then came back and got a good unanimous decision win. An all right unanimous decision win. It wasn't a great performance. Ronnie Lawrence versus Daniel Argueta. A little bit of a boo-boo here from Mr. Keith Peterson. Talk about the fight. It was a good fight before the finish. Were you impressed? I think Argueta came out here and performed really, really well. And Ronnie Lawrence, we talked him up quite a bit, and rightfully so on the preview show. But Argueta was proving as the fight was progressing that he was kind of the stronger fighter in a couple of different departments. Were you impressed by his performance before the finish happened?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, he needed to come out and make a statement, right? There'd been some underwhelming performances in the first couple of UFC outings, and I think he came out and he just took a leaf out of Pat Sabatini's book, and he just said, "I just think I'm better than you here, and I'm just going to be efficient, and I'm just going to snatch the neck, and I'm just going to chase it." Like the scrambles were great. He was deep in on a rear naked choke at one point, and Ronnie Lawrence manages to turn himself out of it, and then he just chased next, and I was impressed. I really was impressed. I think my issue with the stoppage is that this is a choke, lads. Like, this isn't an armbar where if you don't step in, the arm's going to break. And Mark Goddard has said before, if you're in professional MMA, you have to let the arm break. Like, if they're willing to let the arm go, you have to let it break. And then when it breaks, you can step in, fine. Or if it's a leg or whatever it is, you have to let that limb break. This is professional MMA, and these fighters are making them their choice upon themselves. If they don't tap, they don't tap. And if they can continue to fight, well, that's now up to you as the referee to make that judgment call. Especially in chokes where, okay, they're dangerous in that you don't want to be out for too long, obviously. But this was a choke where if Keith Peterson had taken a slightly different angle, he'd have been able to see Ronnie Lawrence.
He needs to be on the other side. Yeah, that's my argument here. I think the positioning of Keith Peterson was on the back side of the choke where he couldn't see the face even of Ronnie Lawrence until he kind of came in over and stopped it, and it was too late. Like, you need to position yourself around at the correct side where you can actually see the choke, you can see the fighter's eyes, you can see how they're reacting, you can shout in their face and see, show me something, and you might get a look up or you might get a thumbs up, or it was like, look at I thought it was handled perfectly after it, but like, and we can give credit to that, but I mean, I wish we didn't have to go there. Like, I mean, you're stealing a finish there from Argueta, possibly. We don't know whether Lawrence would have gotten out of there. But that's the wonder that we're left with the premature stoppage. And fair play, Keith Peterson admitted his mistake. Nobody tried to kind of buttercoat it or back him up. The correct decision was made. The fight was made a no contest. And I'm not going to rag on Keith Peterson. I think he's an excellent ref. He made a mistake, but I think it was a fairly amateur mistake. I mean, the arm flailing and it looked like a tap from the camera angle is one thing, but it wasn't really, and you need to be at the other side to see the choke itself. I think it's a mistake that I wouldn't have expected Keith Peterson to do, and Lord of mercy having Dom Cruz in the booth as well. It's something that I'm going to bring, and I was going to kind of share as a final thought. I mean, I think the booth in the UFC are being very guilty of gaslighting lately. And if you don't know what gaslighting is that we call it maybe back home making a mountain out of a molehill here. And it started from the first fight with Modestas Bukauskas and Zach Pauga, who was a very good fight and a very close fight, where you had Brandon Fitzgerald saying, oh, well, the judges here and the judges that and the refs this and the refs that. And it's like, well, we need to have a little bit of fucking common sense in the booth as well at the same time, and stop over exaggerating stuff that happens inside the cage just because your personal opinion is more valid than what's actually happening inside the octagon. And Fitzgerald is guilty of it. Cruz is guilty of it. Cormier is. And that's why we love and respect John Anik, because he's the only guy that I feel that sits in the booth that has any level of kind of level-headedness that you need when you're responsible for calling what you're seeing there. Because when you're hearing people in the booth saying that stuff, that shit spews into the Twitterverse, and we have everybody up in arms over stuff that we don't really need to be up in arms about. And I mean, I kind of mentioned Bukauskas and Zach Pauga. It was just a close fight, Harry, wasn't it? I don't think there can be any. Look at the last round was a very, very close one. I wouldn't argue. I think if 29-28 to either fighter, I thought rounds 1 was probably Bukauskas, round 2 was Pauga, round 3 was a toss-up, and it's so hard to score. What was your assessment on the fight?
I think Bukauskas, it just really underperformed. Really underperformed. You don't go out and look the way he looked against Tyson Pedro for you to then take a backstep in competition as aggressively as Zach Pauga, who hits hard, is an athlete, moves quickly, but he basically has 2 shots, and that's a leaping left hook and a leaping uppercut, and he throws a right hand now and again. If those are the 3 things that are coming at you, and you're, as Modestas Bukauskas, going out and dismantling a Tyson Pedro, I need to see more. I need to see way more. Like, Pauga repeatedly threw that leaping uppercut and repeatedly landed it, had a really nice check left hook, and that right hand landed over and over and over again. Like, for me, Bukauskas, just like Leroy Duncan, was failing to throw a jab, was failing to throw leg kicks often enough. If you've got a guy like Pauga, who's quite clearly a very, very good athlete, just take his legs away from him. Just keep chipping away. Just keep chipping away. And then guess what? Chip away some more. And so I think Bukalkas, in a similar fashion to Tsaurkyan, one of his weaknesses seems to be that he fights the level of competition that he's in with. Because I was talking to one of my friends that actually trains with Modestas, and he was saying, like, coming into this, Modestas was so confident that he was going to get a finish here, was so buoyed by the confidence that he'd taken from his performance against Tyson Pedro. And maybe that's an element of it, right? Maybe he didn't take Zach Pauga seriously enough. But to me, this
Well,
was really... Go on.
yeah, I think like it might be a harsh assessment, but I think he fought against Tyson Pedro with a point to prove, saying that I'm back, I'm here, I belong. And then he kind of got a little bit too comfortable in this fight, saying I'm here now. Well, no, you've got to maintain, because on another night he could have easily lost that decision, and then all your hard work is gone out the window. That big win over Tyson Pedro has gone out the window, and I think he was kind of put in a position here by the UFC. I always try to think from this business perspective. You know, the UFC probably wanted to put him in there with Pauga, with possibly the hopes of him going out there and getting a finish or putting on another great performance. You know, and Pauga did well. I think probably Pauga fought above his level, to be honest, in this fight. He fought up to the level of his, whereas Modestas brought his level down a little bit, and he got hurt and was not as aggressive as maybe he should have been, or his coaches want. Like, his coaches were screaming at him in round 3 for activity, and yeah, I mean, it was a fair assessment, but he got the win, he got the job done, and we get to talk about what's next for him.
I don't know. I really struggle. Like, in a way, I want to do like a Nick Mariano, like a Nega Mariano, or somebody like a Daton Young, like somebody that really, you know, like I'd like to see him in a fight with somebody that he can grapple with. Like, why not like an Ihor Pretoria, somebody like that, you know?
Yeah.
Like somebody that level, though. I don't need anything above that level.
We're fighting similar enough level now, because, you know, we were saying similar enough to what we said. I can't remember against the fight who, maybe it was, I can't remember, but basically he came in at short notice against Pedro, and we were saying, you know, UFC are saying, giving him this, which on paper was an easier matchup than Tyson Pedro, as you know, here's your full camp against a lower level opponent, for lack of a better term. I mean, Tyson Pedro is in around that same, he's hit and miss as a fighter, but he didn't take the opportunity, so you're not going to get rewarded based off a performance or a win like that, really, aren't you? Not
You're not. And it's Alessandro Costa that you were talking about.
That's right. 100%. That wraps us up. Before we totally finish up, Harry, I'd like to leave you with any final thoughts overall on the card. You know, look, we got through the good, the bad, and the ugly in this card. Obviously, some good moments, some dark moments. But overall, if we're talking about cards delivering, this card delivered and gave us plenty of talking points. And it was a good card for me overall. Your final thoughts before we finish her up?
Really enjoyed watching it back. Some, you know, you have cards, and look, okay, there was a bit of weirdness with some referee decisions and whatever. It's fine, no problem. Yes, it's a shame that Dan Argueta and Ronnie Lawrence didn't get to see out, you know, who was going to win that fight, because we don't know. Ronnie Lawrence could have got out and turned the tide in that fight. Who knows, right? Like, who knows? So, you know, you know, that's difficult. I understand. That's tough. Whatever. This is MMA, though. These things happen. And like, overall, I just thought we saw some really, you know, I was really interested to see what Bukauskas looked like. I was high on Lawrence. I thought Argueta had some horse in the race. I wanted to see whether Blader had made some improvements. You know, hot take, she hasn't. Hernandez Bonda turned out to be a fantastic fight. Can Quinones, great fight. Costa Flick, Costa showed out, wonderful stuff. Dalby, perfect Dalby performance. And we roll on to Sabatini in the main card. Like, just overall, a really enjoyable main card. Really enjoyable card overall.
Mick Maynard will be delighted after that. Another wonderful world in the octagon on Saturday night. We'll be back as always to preview next week's card. It's Ilia Topuria fight week, baby. We got him versus Josh Emmett and plenty of other fights that we're going to discuss a little bit later on this week. As always, we'll be back next week on Tuesday for the balance breakdown to break that card. But let's talk about us first. Join us for the preview show on Thursday. We will see you then. Follow at Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell. Check out the Severe Spotlight. Check out Speaker's Corner. Speaker's Corner is on a roll right now. You're just firing out. It's unbelievable at the level of podcast that you're putting out on Speaker's Corner right now. Really engaging, thoughtful conversations. You can catch them on the SevereMMA Patreon. We'll also be back this week again with the Owl Triangle. Andy Stevenson is back. We're just getting together, no guests again. We're going to shoot the shit about Irish MMA. I'll also be over there on the Chase and Pack on SevereMMA Patreon. Head over there. Please support us out. We're doing our best. We didn't enter here with a entry song. YouTube gave us an old slap on the wrist, and we're already in enough trouble there. So we went straight in there with no intro music. But it was a pleasure as always, Harry. Thank you so much for joining me. As I said, BJJ_Harry Powell at O'Neill MMA. That's where you'll find us talking shit about mixed martial arts on almost a daily basis. Thank you all for listening. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell a friend. We really appreciate your support. We love getting together and talking about the fights. If you like it, let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like. We'll try and change it up for you. Until the next time, take care, folks.